Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our discussions of 1970s disaster movies. And I'd like to bring the conversation, if I may, to a film that is a Hollywood epic film. And it is one with an all-star cast. It has a great setting. It is a complex setting with I would suggest, a very intricate plot that is also an entertainment that is filled with drama, melodrama, soap opera that is executed, I think, really effectively. There are moments of levity. There are moments of tragedy. There are the laughable moments, there are certainly those cheesy moments, and there are the disaster elements as well that present perhaps the primary focus point of this film. And so in that way, it is a disaster film, it is a Hollywood epic, and it is, I think, a grand entertainment for reasons that I'll try to touch upon momentarily. This is a film directed by George Seaton, produced by Ross Hunter for Universal, and among its stellar cast are, for example, Burt Lancaster, Gene Seberg, Dean Martin, Jacqueline Bisset, Helen Hayes, Van Heflin, Maureen Stapleton, Jesse Rose Landis, George Kennedy, and others, Barry Nelson. It's a great cast, and they appear in this film from 1970. Airport. The film Airport is based upon the novel by Arthur Haley, and it has, on the one hand, a presentation about the actual workings of the airport itself. I'm not saying that it is a documentary, but it has, in various moments, certain feels or aspects to it that could be said to be of a documentary perspective, of trying to present information about how the airport works, how it functions, what are some specific details that might not be known to, say, the casual viewer of this film. And so I love how those details emerge. For instance, there's a moment how security personnel are alerted in the general communications, and how certain code words need to be employed in order to essentially not arouse suspicion or perhaps, in an extreme case, panic. So I love little details like that. And also there are some specific technical details about the specifics of the runway and the dynamics of the tower, and how security operations worked for airports at the time. And I love these little details. Of course, too, we know that this is from 1970, and perhaps nowadays, in the 21st century, airline travel might be different, or might be quite different to us. So maybe some of these details might seem to be things that are no longer relevant to us in today's age, but still, I think in those various ways, in terms of a type of explanation as to how things work at an airport, and also how things worked at an airport at that time. In those two, I think, fundamental ways, I think this film has that documentary perspective to it, which I really like. And I understand that this is perhaps carried over from the way in which information of this sort was presented in the original work, the Haley work. And so I admire that aspect to it. What it does to it also establishes the environment very well. After all, it is the airport in question, and how it works, but also in the context of how it needs to work and operate while all this stuff is happening all at once, right? Because this brings in the disaster element, because we have the it's various sources of the disaster that are at the focus of this plot. We have the snowstorm, we have the airline with the bomb, and then we also have the runway issue. So there are various elements that are all in one way or another connected to the airport environment and how it operates. And so I like this way that the airport information related stuff is presented, and it leads very nicely into further presenting the disaster element and also giving us the information as to not just what the disaster points are, but why they are as serious as they are. For example, the runway issue, I think, is one that's presented in a way that is very helpful when we think about how much information about the runway dynamics we need in order to appreciate the gravity of that particular disaster element of that situation. And so I like how this interaction between the environment setting, the information that we are presented, and the disaster points. I like how this is all interconnected. And in fact, it makes those disaster points much more heightened in my view, and the panic level and the risk factor is, I think, better understood by me because of this information. So I like that interplay. And also, it allows us to see the characters at work. And as we know from this cast, there are so many characters that we follow. I like how the film is able to balance, to a certain degree, the various plots or subplots or character arcs that we are following as viewers, because we are following characters here, there, and everywhere, it feels. But it does feel at the same time, too, that the film and the story is giving each particular point, each particular character arc, its own time to shine in the spotlight, as it were. There's, I think, a real sense of well-established balance among all the character plots. And so we are speaking, for example, about the Helen Hayes character plot, or about Burt Lancaster and Gene Seberg and how they are trying to work on the airport ground level. And of course, Dean Martin and Jacqueline Bisset, and the airline flight level. And then, of course, the Van Heflin and Morn Stapleton aspect of it, which is also very, very significant. And other things of that nature. So these, and of course we also have, I have to mention George Kennedy. George Kennedy's character here, Petroni, and his character, I think, is a very memorable one among a set of characters that are quite memorable indeed. And what I love too about this cast is that it is one that is taking the story very, very seriously, and I think that serves it very well, and that gives the story, again, a further sense of balance among its various tones, if you will. And this is a film that is, I would say, encompassing a lot of different tones. So first of all, we do have the aspect of the drama or melodrama or soap opera aspect, because we see all these characters and how they are interrelated, and what their relationships are, and maybe there are professional relationships that are also personal relationships. This person is related to that person in this way, who is also related to this person in this way, who is also related to that person in this way, and there's someone who, these people are having an affair, or these people are married, these people don't like each other, and that type of story is in and of itself very entertaining. And so those little details that emerge there, I think, allow us entry into their worlds and their concerns. But it is also very entertaining. And I love that aspect of this. And to be perfectly upfront about it too, it could be said that a large portion of this film is perhaps focused in on this drama, melodrama, soap opera aspect of the story. So it is a disaster film, but it's also very much a film about these characters. So that's a very important component of that. And I think the performers and the actors really do a great job, because alongside with that, or part of that, are also moments. There could be moments, say, of levity and humor and perhaps even camp on the one hand, and that's perfectly fine, and that I think is delivered and presented in a very great way, an entertaining way. There are also moments of suspense and terror and tragedy and sadness. There are some moments of certain character beats, of certain characters that really reach gut-wrenching levels of emotion. And so I really admire this film. It's able to capture those different storylines in, I think, a balanced way. And that's, I think, one of the strengths of this, because we can follow these characters when it comes time for the disaster elements to hit, then we are absorbed in their storylines, hopefully anyway. And so that makes the disaster elements all the more suspenseful. And the disaster elements, I should say, too, I think are really, really well pulled off. I think there is a real sense of tension, and the threat is expressed in these set pieces that are, you can tell that there was a lot of care and attention brought to them, and when they are pulled off, they are really pulled off. And I also love, too, I mentioned it earlier, the information is presented to us. There is sometimes this idea of plans, setups, what characters are thinking before the actual events happen, and then once those events happen, then the aftermath or consequences occur, and then how the characters need to respond or react in an agile way in order to avert further disaster. So I like that way in which the disaster element information is presented and portrayed in this particular film. And I should say, too, that the film is often considered to be, perhaps, for many reasons, the first film, or the film that launched, say, the 1970s disaster movie genre. I think that's true for a number of reasons. It does feel like it's a film that has a lot of traits and themes and aspects of it that seem to be present in other films of a disaster nature type that will follow 1970s Airport. And so that makes this film Airport feel like a type of template film, as well as a film that is an entertainment on its own merits. And also, it is a film that is going to follow, or going to be followed by, a number of other films in the what will be called the so-called Airport series of films. And so it feels like a template film, not just in the context of 1970s disaster movies, but also within the context of what will end up becoming its own little franchise, or not little, it's quite a significant franchise, especially in the context of 1970s disaster films. And so this is something that hopefully we can look forward to, and I will try to maybe talk about the other Airport films during these videos in the next few days or weeks. So please stay tuned if you're interested. I should mention on that point, before we move on, that what I have here on the table is the Blu-ray 4-film pack, or 4-disc pack, I think. And it's the pack which has all the films in it on their own disc, and so it's in this very convenient collection on Blu-ray. And so I will probably, or not probably, I will use this again when we talk about the other films in the Airport series, Airport 75, Airport 77, and the Concorde Airport 79. So again, in case you're interested. I should say also that on that point about how this film Airport, the 1970 film Airport, how it's often regarded as being the start of the 1970s disaster movie era, and I agree with that on the one hand. Also, it can be said to be a part of, say, the Hollywood filmmaking history that led up to through the 1950s and 1960s, and led up to that point in 1970, because there are aspects of this that also feel like part of that era in the 1960s Hollywood filmmaking style and production method, right? Because we have a number of players and a number of filmmakers and people on the crew who are perhaps part of that earlier Hollywood filmmaking tradition. And so I mentioned director George Seaton. Also, there's producer Ross Hunter, who produces for Universal. There's also Alfred Newman, who provided the really great score and that wonderful, I'm not sure if I can describe it well, but that wonderful staccato type of theme that is a really driving theme. And so this is, we understand, Alfred Newman's last film score in a career that spanned so many films. And also we have the appearance of these great stars. I mentioned, of course, Burt Lancaster and Dean Martin, for example, but also we have Van Heflin and Jesse Roslandis, and we also understand that for Van Heflin and Jesse Roslandis, this was their last film, and so this feels like it's falling in a particular point in history, in cinematic history. It's perhaps marking the latter half or the latter parts of the Hollywood filmmaking production era up through the late 1960s, leading to 1970. And then from this point, it'll lead to this other chapter or subchapter, if you will, of filmmaking in terms of the 1970s disaster movie way of making film. So it feels like there is transition as well as there being continuity, and there is being a type of a film that is feeling like it's part of an era of the past as well as part of an era that is to come. So in that way, there's continuity and transition, and it also acts on its own merits. Airport does, and I say that because it is so thoroughly entertaining. Even to this day, it is so entertaining, and I laugh. I am scared. I am with the characters, and I admit sometimes I am laughing with the film. Maybe there are moments when I might be laughing at the film, and I see and I can recognize certain camp elements to it. And that's fine too, because as I was trying to indicate in earlier videos, that's part of the reason why these films are so entertaining. Disaster films have that. They have this way of making us feel entertained from all various vantage points of the entertainment spectrum. And I think Airport from 1970 is a prime example of this. This is the film called Airport. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.